Good morning. Great to see everybody out. Spring, you can almost feel that spring is here and maybe the snow is going to finally melt. Though I know there's some more stuff that's supposed to be coming. People are clapping already. It's so good to see everyone. My name is Andrew Zwicker. I'm the head of public engagement and workforce development here. For me, I've had several weeks off. One was I was at a professional conference a few weeks ago, as some of you were like, where'd he go? And then last week, we always take 1 week off for one of the most amazing things ever, which is a science competition. Instead of like an athletic competition, it's this high school science bowl. 64 high schools were here last Saturday to compete for who was the number one science team. It's sort of like high-speed Jeopardy. And I can tell you, as someone who's reading the questions, I'm still trying to absorb the question, and they're already buzzing in with the answer. Phenomenal. Like, whatever you think of the world, the next generation is going to save us. I'm pretty sure. I'm counting on it, actually. Anyone here from either West Windsor or Plainsboro? There you go, because West Windsor Plainsboro North won the competition. Are you from West Windsor? No. And they go now to compete against approximately 50 other high schools in Washington, D.C., uh, end of March, I think it is, to become the national champion. So we shall see. So with that, yep, welcome back. That's mostly to me. Um, we were laughing before because both we know why you come to these lectures all the time, but bottom left will be relevant to today's lecture, I think, in some ways. So we're be honest now, before the lecture started. Who had a donut? Ah, there you go. So, as always, we'll get to questions at the end. There are microphones here and here if you just want to queue up. If the steps are in any way an issue, we'll have a microphone moving around. And for those of you on Zoom, I'll be monitoring the questions. Just put your question in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. One thing just a little bit different for this week, we have a favor to ask, which is we are doing a customer survey. You're the customer. So if you have a phone, we also have paper copies of this, but this is a survey asking for your feedback. Um, it's anonymous, so you can say all the nice things you want, or you can say all the honest things you want. It's totally up to you. But if you could just take a screenshot of that, and anybody who doesn't have a phone or misses that, out in the hallway, we've got paper copies. It'll just take a few minutes if you're doing a paper copy or a few minutes on your phone. Don't do it now because you're about to have a scintillating lecture. Okay. With that, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Professor Lydia Lynch, who's a professor here at Princeton and at the Ludwig Center for Cancer Research. She's an immunologist who studies the connection between the immune and metabolic systems. You can see that she was for 14 years at Harvard and then decided to come to the better of the Ivy Leagues. We appreciate that. She's the Irish Woman of the Year, and her portrait is on the wall of the Royal Irish Academy. That's very cool. You have a picture of that in your talk. Um, she's a recipient of a Cancer Research Institute Investigator Award, the Mark Foundation Emerging Leader Award, a new Investigator Award, Rutgers Cancer Institute, a member of the American Association for Cancer Research, President's Task Force for Aging, Environment, and Cancer. Would you please give a warm welcome to Professor Lynch?
Thanks so much.
And of course, before we get started, I have a few questions to ask and for you to share with the audience, really about your personal journey. So for you, when did you first get interested in science?
Um, I didn't know I wanted to be a scientist until the final year of high school, really, when in Ireland you have to fill out a CAO form and you have to decide what you want to do, and none of us really knew what we wanted to do. And so I picked science because I liked science in school. But in hindsight, when I look back, I was always a scientist. So my whole life was kind of, as a child, I was always picking, leaves and picking flowers and opening them up and thinking about how they were all put together. All of my toys, I always cut them open, see how everything works. So it was probably always there. I just didn't know it. Yeah.
So, in that journey from a young child on up, tell us about a teacher who had a significant influence on you.
Um, I had some great teachers, thank God, because this is how I ended up, staying in school and going to college. Probably my favorite teacher and most relevant to science was my biology teacher, Sister Elizabeth Walsh. She was a nun, but somehow managed to teach us about evolution. And because like she taught it as if it was God's creation in evolution. Evolution was God's creation. And so she was able to, everything she taught us about biology was, she loved every single part of it. And even like, she loved even creatures that we wouldn't typically love, like cockroaches. She told us like why they were created and how they did some good. And she just made us love everything in biology.
So, how about when you're not doing science, a hobby, something you do for fun?
I've just started playing pickleball last year. Um, and I had to have some surgery, so I've been off it, so I haven't gone back on it until April, but I never really played racket things, so I didn't think I'd be able to, but it's very easy to pick up, and I just became addicted to it very quickly. Yeah.
So, this is the 75th anniversary of the Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory. So, I've added this last question for all of our speakers this year, which is tell us about your field 75 years ago.
It wasn't much of a field. So I'm an immunologist. The cells that we're going to talk about today, particularly natural killer cells, they weren't discovered. So we all obviously already had them, but we didn't know that we had them. And so from a molecular biology point of view, the late 50s is when the DNA double helix was discovered. And then I've just lectured about it the other day on Thursday. In 1961, the genetic code was cracked. So we understood what nucleotides in DNA coded for proteins. That was the beginning of that. But in terms of immunology, there wasn't much.
Well, thank you so much. And so, Harry, if you could switch the slides over. And
I should share.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you just share it, will be good. How Diet and Obesity Shape Our Immune System's Ability to Kill from Professor Lydia Lynch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, yeah, thank you for the lovely introduction and also for the invitation to be here. It's a real honor because, this has been Science on Saturday has been going on for more than 40 years, which is incredible. And so I'm really very happy to take part in it. And I'm going to talk to you about the major part of our research in Princeton and in the Ludwig Institute for Cancer Research is how the environment, particularly what we eat and obesity, impact on cancer and impact on our immune system's ability to fight cancer. So, as Andrew mentioned, all of us who had a donut can feel bad for the next hour. Now let's see. Okay, so this was mentioned already, but this is more just as a warning for my accent. I'm from Dublin, and people from Dublin often don't pronounce T at the end of the sentence, so I hope that you can understand what I'm saying. I did my so Dublin doesn't look like this, more like this. I did my undergrad in Dublin, and I did my PhD in human immunology in St. Vincent's University Hospital in Dublin. And then I met the second super important person in my life. The first one was my biology teacher, Sister Elizabeth. When I was doing my PhD, Cleona O'Farrelly was my PhD supervisor. And this was a huge turning point in my life because she believed in me, and I didn't really know. I enjoyed the PhD, I enjoyed college, but I didn't know it was going to be a career. And when I met Cleona, my whole life changed. And so I'm very grateful to her. So I was finishing up. So first of all, in college, I did my fourth year project in Cleana's lab, and I had no intention of doing a PhD. And she said, "Well, you absolutely must." So then I did. And then at the end of the PhD, and I didn't really have any other plans. Then at the end of the PhD, again, I didn't know exactly what I was going to do. And she said, "Lydia, you have to go to America." And I said, "How am I going to go to America?" I had at this stage three children. We were looking after my dad, who was 76. He lived with us. He couldn't live on his own. And I just said, "You're crazy, Cleena. How am I going to go to America?" And she said, "You just will. You need to go to America." So I said, "Right, I'll apply to some fellowships." I applied for the Marie Curie Fellowship, and I applied for the L'Oreal UNESCO International Women in Science Fellowship, and I got the two of them. And then I came home and was like, "Oh my God, I think we're going to move to America." So luckily, Paul agreed. And then the next step was to ask my dad, "Please, Dad, come with us to America." And he said, "Okay." So this is very true. I don't know who has seen the Little Miss Sunshine movie. But this is exactly what we looked like. We came, all of us, we had about three suitcases between six of us, and we didn't have anything else. And so we're a typical immigrant story. We came for the American dream. This is the best place to do science, and so that's why I really wanted to come. We had fellowship for I had a fellowship for 3 years, and so I wanted to pack as much work into the 3 years as possible. Paul's friend was a plumber, and he gave us his old plumbing van, and it looked kind of like this, and it smelled like oil, and we'd have to light scented candles in it to just get in. And so this is how we lived for the first 3 years, and somehow everything went very well. And I ended up getting my own lab in Harvard, where we planned again to not leave. And then I visited Princeton, and I fell in love with Princeton. And hence, we decided to uproot from Boston and move here 2 years ago, which I'm so glad we did. I love Princeton so much. Okay, so many of my lab came with me, and also we've got some new people since we started. And the lab studies immunometabolism, which is the mix between the immune system and the metabolic system. And what I mean by this, in short, is our immune cells are what we eat. That's why I was making the reference that we should feel bad if we eat donuts, but no, not really. So our our metabolic system, when we eat, and also just from the energy that we expend, a lot of our metabolic organs, which is like our muscle, our adipose tissue, our liver, and our gut, that generates most of the metabolites and the nutrients in our body. And these nutrients are what immune cells eat. All cells eat them, actually. And so, therefore, what we put in and what we metabolize affects what our immune cells do, because they eat whatever is available to them. Like us, if we open the fridge and it's full of bad things, and that's all that we can eat, that's what we eat. Or if it's full of good things. So that's essentially the connection between the metabolic system and the immune system. And then in turn, whatever our immune cells eat, it changes the function of what they can do. And our immune cells, in turn, which is kind of a new field, are also able to control or to regulate our whole body metabolism. So it's really like a circle here. And so we study this at normal steady state, which is like normally, just based on, what we eat and how we metabolize things, how that affects the immune system. But also we study when we perturb the system. So if we change our diet, or in people living with obesity, people living with cancer, also exercise, anything that changes our metabolites and our nutrients, which are these things here, change our immune cells, and we want to understand how they do that. And so we really do much of our research on that question in obesity, because it's a perfect system to study how diet and obesity affect the immune system. And I got interested in this about 20 years ago. And that's because 20 years ago, we were seeing so many immune-related complications associated with obesity. So all the things here in blue, these are all things that we knew were associated with obesity. Cardiac issues, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, diabetes, insulin resistance, sleep apnea. But 20 years ago, it was also starting to emerge that people living with obesity also had all of these things here in red. So more CNS like brain and spinal inflammation. There's more Parkinson's and Alzheimer's now associated with obesity, more asthma, more respiratory infections. So this was seen first with H1N1. People that living with obesity were the ones that were hospitalized with H1N1. We, of course, seen it again during COVID. Living with obesity was a risk factor for more severe COVID and hospitalization and death from COVID, and also it give you an increased. It bumped you up to get the vaccine first. At the same time, vaccines often don't work as well in people living with obesity, and also more arthritis, more other autoimmune disease like multiple sclerosis, more psoriasis, and more cancer. 13 types of cancer are increased in people living with obesity. And so this is the one out of all of these things that I'll talk about today. But what this tells you is these are all immune driven. And so it suggests that the immune system is different in people living with obesity. So for today's talk, we're just going to focus on cancer side, because it's a huge challenge to understand this. And so by 2035, half the global population will have obesity. And this is even despite Ozempic and GLP therapies and things like that. Obesity is a risk factor for 13 types of cancer. Here they are as an example. Endometrial cancer is the largest risk, and 70% of endometrial cancer now is due to obesity, which is obviously really high. Typically, cancer was a disease with age, but because of modern medicine, the survival from cancer and because of treatment is going much down. So people are surviving cancer much more, which is really great. However, the most tragic part is while older people are surviving cancer more, the incidence of early onset cancer has gone up by 71%, which is shocking because you just wouldn't expect that this would happen. And this has been linked to diet, alcohol, physical activity, and obesity being increased in younger people now. So we feel that there's an urgent need to take action. And to take action, we need to understand why obesity is associated with cancer. And so my lab focuses on the immune system part because we know that the immune system is really critical in protecting us from cancer. And for this talk, we're going to talk about natural killer cells. And these are in our blood. We have, for every 1 ml of blood, we have 1 million immune cells, and 10% of them are natural killer cells. So, that's a tumor there, and I'll play it again. That's a tumor there, that's a natural killer cell. And actually, as we're sitting here now, our natural killer cells are doing this. Because it's not only after we get cancer, it's when cells are transforming into cancer. Our natural killer cells are whizzing around our body all the time, trying to detect cells that are transforming. And cells are transforming all the time. And so we are wondering if there's some sort of a difference in natural killer cells in obesity and their ability to detect and kill cancer. And also viruses, because natural killer cells are our first line of defense in our body against virally infected cells and cancer, both of which are increased with obesity. So how do NK cells do this? So all of our healthy cells have these markers on them, receptors on them, and that tells us that this is our cell, don't kill it. Now, if we didn't have them, our own natural killer cells would kill us. And so that's why if, for example, I take someone's cells here from your body and inject them into mine, the body will reject them because it will have your markers on them and not mine. So these are how normal cells are protected from our own immune system. as a tumor cell starts to grow, as a cell starts to transform into a tumor cell, it starts to lose the self markers. It's getting very stressed because it's grown so fast, so much faster than normal cells, and there's not enough room for it, and it's getting deprived of oxygen, and it's trying to make more blood vessels. That's what tumors do. And with all that, it starts to get all these stress signals, and it starts to lose markers of self because it's not behaving like self anymore. And that is what NK cells recognize. NK cells recognize self, and it tells them, it puts the brakes on them, don't kill. When it loses self, then it's targeted by the NK cell. And then, as well as loss of self, it also has to have stress markers. And so that's how that works. So we're wondering what part of this might be not working properly in obesity. So this is another picture here. This is a tumor cell. This is a natural killer cell. You can see it's putting all its feelers out. It's saying, is this a tumor? Yes, it is. And when it kills it, the tumor turns red. So we started to look at natural killer cells in the blood of people living with obesity years ago in 2009, and we found that people living with obesity have less natural killer cells in the blood, and when we put them in a dish with tumor cells, they kill much less, and it takes them much longer to kill. So that was the first clue that something was wrong. And then the next thing that we did, don't worry, we don't have to go into all of this, but this is when then I moved to America, we decided to sequence the natural killer cells. So we isolated natural killer cells from people who were non-obese and people who were obese, and then we did a complete genome sequencing of them. So we looked at all of the genes in the natural killer cells. And the first thing that we found was that the machinery for killing was completely downregulated, so it wasn't there. So this is the NK cells from people with obesity and from lean. So you can see the genes are there normally, and they're missing from people with obesity. And so them genes, they're perforin. I'll just show you perforin and granzymes. That's how natural killer cells kill. So perforin is a gun. It shoots from the natural killer cell into the tumor, and it makes a hole in the tumor. And then the granzymes go into that hole and explode the tumor like a bomb through caspases. And that's how they do it. Now, them machineries were missing in people living with obesity. And so that's the things that were missing. And then what was the things that were there instead? All of these genes that I've highlighted here. These are all lipid genes, all fat metabolism genes. And so it looks like the NK cells in obesity start to express all of these genes that are usually associated with fat cells or adipocytes. And so then we decided, okay, maybe they're taking up fat from the diet. Maybe they're taking it up from the blood. So we took the NK cells and we put them under a microscope, and we stained them with things that would be able to detect the lipids. So this is NK cells from a non-obese person. So this kind of tells you it's an NK cell. This is where the perforin and the granzymes are. And these are the lipids. The fats, you can see very few, very few lipids usually are there. And this is the perforin, which are inside of these vesicles. But if you look at NK cells from people that have been isolated from people with obesity, you can see they have very little perforin, but they have a lot of these lipid droplets. So they're full of fat on the inside. And when you have, this is an example of 3 natural killer cells. And 2 of them have a lot of lipid droplets, and they have no perforin, which is the machinery to kill. This one here hasn't got that much lipid droplets, and it still has perforin. So for some reason, we found that by taking up lipids from the diet, it causes a loss of the natural killer cell killing machinery. So we wondered, usually when you feed any cell, including a natural killer cell, a different substrate. So instead of feeding it glucose or carbohydrate or protein, it switches its metabolism to be able to metabolize what you've given it, because it needs to metabolize it for energy. So if the NK cells are now eating lipids instead of eating glucose, are they not able to metabolize it? And we can measure the metabolism of cells with this machine called the seahorse. And I'm not going to go into all the graphs of it, but what essentially we found is that when we measured ATP, which is the energy currency that cells use to work. We found that normal NK cells are full of ATP, they're energized, but we found that NK cells from people living with obesity are full of lipids and had no ATP. And so if they don't have any ATP, then they don't have much energy to do their job. And we were surprised at this because they're not maybe not taking glucose, but they're taking fat. So why can they not turn the fat into energy? Because that's what happens in the mitochondria. But it just seemed like there was too much lipids going into the cell, and it was overwhelming the mitochondria. They weren't able to metabolize it anymore, and so the NK cell was becoming clogged full of lipids. So, because we are molecular biologists, it wasn't enough that we just know that they can't kill. We wanted to know why they couldn't kill. And Xavier, he was the first postdoc in my lab who was also a molecular biologist. And he really wanted to understand on the steps of killing, which step can they not do? Okay, so I'm just going to go through this very simply. This is your natural killer cell. This is your target cell. So this is the tumor cell. When the natural killer cell sees the tumor cell, it sends an activatory signal into the NK cell, and all of these are called lytic granules. That's where the perforin and the granzymes are. They all come together to this organizing center, and then this organizing center thing brings all of the lytic granules, all of the killing machinery to the tumor. And then it releases it, the gun shoots in, the granzymes go in and kill the tumor. And you can image this in a microscope. And this part is very important because if the NK cell just releases the granules everywhere and doesn't do it in this targeted way, the granules will kill our cells. And so this is very important. So we image this, and this is how it looks. This is the tumor cell here. This is the natural killer cell. It starts off as a circle. Then when it sees the tumor, it really moves itself, and all of these things here is the granzymes and the perforins that are going to go into the tumor to kill it. So we did this imaging with NK cells from people who are non-obese versus obese. And what we seen was, this is how it's supposed to look. This is your NK cell, this is your tumor cell. All of your lytic granules marked here in this color are in the right place, and they're going to be, this is called the synapse, that's the right place. They're going to be released in, and the tumor will die. In the NK cells from people with obesity, the NK cells were still able to recognize the tumor. This was a surprise. We could see them still moving to the tumor like this, and they could still latch on to the tumor. So they still knew it was a tumor, but they couldn't move their lytic granules from they hadn't got that many lytic granules to begin with. The ones that they did have, they couldn't move them to the synapse. So they were able to stick onto the tumor, but not able to kill it. And we found that they needed ATP, the energy source, to be able to move this kind of heavy machinery to the tumor, and they were lacking that energy, and so they didn't kill. Now, NK cells are serial killers, so they can kill 10 tumors. They kill one, then the tumor tells the NK cell, okay, I'm dead, or the NK cell senses that it's dead, and then it moves on and it kills again, and it does that 10 times until it becomes exhausted. So when an NK cell can't kill the first tumor, it stays stuck onto it, and so the tumor doesn't die, but it also prevents it from killing 10 more tumors. And so we think that this is one of the problems in obesity. So does this mean that you would get more cancer if you have NK cells that don't kill well? In humans, the only thing that we can do is look in a dish. So, we can do this, and you can see that when there's no legend here. Sorry. When the NK cell, it's 1-to-1, one NK cell to one tumor. And when you put 5 NK cells, they kill more. And when you put 10-to-1, it's more. But when the NK cells are full of lipids, they can kill less. But in a dish, that's the only way we can do that. Obviously, we can't do it in a human. And so to understand even deeper, we looked to mouse models. And you can do mouse models of obesity. A normal mouse in the lab eats a diet that is about 10% fat. A high-fat diet is a mouse model of obesity where the diet has 40% of its calories from fat instead of 10%. And then it becomes, over time, obese. And so when we did this in mice, you can see when the mouse develops melanoma or colorectal cancer, if it has eaten a high-fat diet instead of the regular fat diet, the tumors grow bigger in both melanoma and colorectal cancer. And when you take NK cells and inject them into a mouse that has cancer, usually the NK cells can reduce the tumor growth. But if you take NK cells from a mouse that had obesity, they can't. It's the same as just injecting in water. And so this kind of proves that the defects in NK cells lead to increased cancer in a mouse anyway, and in addition, humans. Okay. But that's really from the immune cell side. We also know that there's the reference to the donut, sorry. we also we also know that a high-fat diet doesn't just affect our immune system. Actually, we only are realizing it affects our immune system. Before this, we already knew it affected the tumor. And many people have shown that in obesity, there's high glucose, there's high insulin, and these connect to these glucose and insulin receptors on the tumor, and that makes it tells the tumor, okay, here's all the food that you need to grow. This is your growth signal. You have plenty of food there. Keep growing, keep growing, keep growing. And that's what obesity does to the tumor, even separate to the immune system. And so so this part was already known. But what wasn't known was that what lipids do. So there's high glucose, there's high insulin, and there's high lipids in obesity. And around the same time that we were discovering what the lipids did to the immune system, other people were discovering, oh, lipids don't impair tumors. Tumors love lipids. And so it's really a double hit. What you're given lipids, when you have high lipids, high fat, your immune system is impaired, but tumors are very metabolically flexible. And so they can take that fat and turn it into energy. And this is my friend, and he did his PhD in Harvard. Now he has his own lab in Cold Spring Harbor, and he found some of this work. So he showed that in colorectal cancer, when you feed the mouse a high-fat diet, in colorectal cancer, the cells that cause the colorectal cancer turn on the exact same lipid metabolism pathways as the immune cells do that I've just shown you, but them immune pathways or them lipid pathways impair the immune system, but they really fuel tumors. And so it's kind of a double hit. And particularly cells that escape the primary tumor and go and metastasize somewhere else. So for example, if you have breast cancer and it goes to the lung, the cells that escape that first seed the lung from the breast, they particularly love lipids. And so lipids and high fat promote metastasis. Now, we wanted to go back to humans, not do so much in mouse. And so we started to collect samples from patients with endometrial cancer or colorectal cancer, or now we've just started with Coral O'Main in Rutgers with breast cancer. And to collect these samples from patients who were lean or obese with similar type of cancer. And so we started with endometrial cancer, and we did this work with Professor Donal Brennan in UCD, where I came from in Ireland, and we continue to collaborate and share between him and here. And we picked endometrial cancer to begin because there's 7 times greater risk of endometrial cancer with obesity, and the incidence of endometrial cancer has increased 132% in the last 20 years because of obesity. So we collect samples and we stain them for markers of immune cells, because a tumor that has many immune cells in it has a much better prognosis. So if you have immune cells in there, it's usually they're trying to fight the tumor, and you usually have a better prognosis. You also have a better prognosis for immunotherapy to work. But if you have a tumor that doesn't have immune cells in there, it's often worse prognosis and immunotherapy doesn't work. So the first thing people often do is you look inside down the microscope of a tumor and see how many immune cells are inside. So all of these brown cells here are different types of immune cells, T cells, for example. And you can see in this patient who has a BMI of 26, she has stage 1 grade 2 endometrial cancer. She has a lot of immune cells in there. And this woman who has the same type and stage and grade cancer, but has a BMI of 46, has less immune cells in there. She still has some, but she has less. And so as we collected more, we see that with the increasing BMI, you've got less of the cells, you've got less of the immune cells coming into the tumor. And interestingly, this is exactly what we've seen in mice. So in the mouse models of melanoma and colorectal cancer, we've seen tumors that had some immune cells around the outside, but not on the inside. Whereas in the non-obese setting, you see the immune cells able to get in, and that means they're at least trying to kill. Then we had this amazing opportunity to work with Donal and to see what was the effect of weight loss on the endometrial cancer. And so these are women that have a very early stage endometrial cancer. This doesn't work if it's late stage because it's too risky. But they're women that often the women with endometrial cancer with obesity are very young. And the treatment for endometrial cancer is hysterectomy. And so they don't want to have a hysterectomy. And so they are offered this bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, where the small intestine is reduced to reduce absorption and the stomach is stapled. And so the patient still has their endometrial cancer, but goes for this weight loss surgery. And in the patients we've done so far, almost everybody loses a significant amount of weight while they still have endometrial cancer. And here we've done more than this now. Here I'm just showing the first 9 patients. We see that 6 of the 9 patients that came in with endometrial cancer and had bariatric surgery had complete regression. They have no endometrial cancer after 6 months. And so the weight loss has helped the endometrial cancer. 2 patients had the same level of endometrial cancer, didn't get worse, and 1 patient got worse. And so when the cancer progresses, they're very carefully monitored. Obviously, don't just leave them. When it progresses, then they have bariatric surgery. Then they have a hysterectomy for the treatment. So we wanted to actually do the genome of the tumor before and after the surgery, but of the 9 patients, 6 of them had no tumor afterwards, so we weren't able to look. But in these 2 patients, we could see because they still had some tumor, and we found that when this is one of them patients. So this is the markers. Again, we're looking at the brown cells. This is the markers of the immune cells in the patient. She's at the beginning. She's 177 kilograms. She has her bariatric surgery here, and within a few months now, the tumor has started to get more immune cells. And we see the same in mice. When they lose weight, then the immune system is able to get into the tumor. And so we're still trying to study this. We don't know how this is happening, but this is a big focus of the lab, is to try and understand how weight loss helps the immune system get into the tumor. And a new trial that we have just started, as I said, women with endometrial cancer associated with obesity, they're often young, they don't want to have a hysterectomy. They often don't want to have bariatric surgery either because it's very life-changing. And so now we're going to see if these GLP medicines, this Ozempic and tirzepatide, if these can do the same effect as bariatric surgery. And so we've started this trial in Ireland. The women, if they have early stage, they'll be either given the placebo or tirzepatide, which is the GLP combo with GIP, and then we will very carefully monitor them to see if the endometrial cancer goes away. And then we will be able to collect the tumor along the way because it's accessible and try and understand how it's generating an immune response, hopefully. Oh, sorry, this is gone a bit funky. So just to summarize that first part there, what we think is in obesity, lipids, fats, are a common feature of a pro-tumor response. So this is supposed to say free fatty acids. We know that there's free fatty acids increased in our blood when we eat a very high-fat diet meal, and also in obesity. And some of it is coming from the food, and some of it is coming from your adipose tissue, your fat, which is bursting as it's getting bigger, and it's releasing the contents, which is lipids. All of this is well known that these lipids go in and stick to our blood vessels, cause atherosclerosis. They go to our liver, cause fatty liver disease. They go to the pancreas, muscle, they cause insulin resistance. But what we now know as well is that the tumor, if you have a tumor, that takes up the lipids too, and it causes the tumor to expand. And we also know that the immune system takes up the lipids, and the cells that we need to kill the tumor become clogged with lipids and are no longer able to kill. So we are working on which immunometabolic pathways, immune and metabolic systems combined, what pathways might be beneficial to target to improve immunity in people with metabolic disorders or with obesity. And we might be able to do this with drugs, but another question that we're asking is, could we achieve this through the diet? And this brings me to the last part of the talk, which is all obesity the same? Is it just weight? Is it just heaviness or excess adiposity? Or is it the diet? Is there something in a high-fat diet that's particularly bad? So to ask this, we went back to mouse models to begin with, and then we will hopefully go to humans. And we fed mice, instead of just giving them the regular high-fat diet, which in studies is usually from lard, we fed mice a high-fat diet, which is, again, 45% of the calories come from fat. The fat is either beef, lard, butter, palm oil, olive oil, coconut oil, or peanut oil. Everything else in their diet is exactly the same. Does anyone want to guess what one would be the worst? Lard, coconut oil. So my prediction was coconut oil because it has the most saturated fat. When you feed it to the mouse becomes almost rigid. Its adipose tissue is quite stiff. We also thought lard because we know that it's full of, we know from our studies already that lard is bad and it makes the tumor grow faster. We had an awful lot of other hypotheses. We thought it might be palm oil. Then we were thinking omega-6, omega-3 ratios might be important. What we found was, first of all the high-fat diets made the mice obese, so it didn't matter where the fat came from, they become obese. But here we're looking at tumor growth. This is a melanoma. And what we're looking at, the black here is normal high-fat diet, or sorry, normal standard 10% diet. So anything above that means it's accelerated growth. And we see, again, lard accelerates the tumor growth. We already knew that. Coconut oil didn't. Palm oil didn't. Olive oil didn't. But the beef did, and the butter did, and the lard did. So we were wrong about the coconut oil. We had so many other different hypotheses. We were wrong about them all. Does anybody guess what this tells us? Yes. It looks like animal high-fat diet is what accelerated the tumor growth and not the high-fat diet from plants. But they're all equally obese. So it also uncouples obesity from the diet because the palm oil is equally as obese as the butter, but doesn't have accelerated tumor growth. So it really pinpoints that there's something in the diet. And so rather than constantly feeding mice all of the different diets, we picked the ones that were the most different to each other, which was butter and palm oil, to try and understand this better. So, don't know what's happened here. I should say, because I wouldn't be let back into Ireland, I'm not saying that butter causes cancer and palm oil does not. Kerrygold butter is probably my favorite food. But obviously moderation is important. So the point is not to say, okay, we should eat lots of butter or we should eat lots of palm oil and not eat any butter. This is a model. We're trying to understand what part of the diet is bad. And so we're using it as, can we learn something about the best versus the worst? And what we had thought was that we had a kind of metabolically healthy mouse in the palm oil. It was still obese, but it didn't have, maybe it didn't have diabetes or something, and maybe it was that. But that's not what we found either. We found they both gained the same amount of weight. it wasn't some sort of a distribution. It wasn't like an apple versus pear shaped mouse. They were the visceral versus the subcutaneous was the same, but the glucose tolerance test, which is a measure of prediabetes in a mouse, they were equally as bad. So they were both having the metabolic effects of a high fat diet, but still only one was having accelerated tumor growth. We didn't know if it was just melanoma. So here's the melanoma again. When we did it again, you can see the butter has accelerated tumor growth, but not the PAM or the standard fat. But we also seen this was true in breast cancer. Accelerated tumor growth with butter, but not PAM. And true in lung cancer as well. Accelerated tumor growth with butter, but not palm oil. We didn't find it in every tumor. We found that colorectal cancer had accelerated tumor growth with every diet. And so there's something about colorectal cancer that just really likes fat, no matter where it comes from. But in other ones, there was a preference for the type of fat. And this is just one more data point here. We went back to what we had seen in humans, where we see this lipid accumulation in the immune cells. In mice, we also see this. This is an NK cell. This is measured on flow cytometry, and we're able to look at lipid levels. And you can see here in red, this is the mice fed the butter. They have a lot more lipids in them than the mice that are on normal diet or on PAM-fed diet. So even though the same amount of lipids are going into the mouse and the same amount of fat is going in, and they're becoming equally obese, it's not accumulating in the immune cells if it's coming from palm oil, but it is from butter and from beef and from lard. And again, there was no major differences in the whole body metabolism. So we thought that there would be, but there wasn't. And so we thought, okay, well, maybe let's go one level deeper, not just look at like how the body handles glucose, but let's look at all the metabolites in the mouse. And when we did this, we see these are the metabolites that are down in mice-fed mice-fed butter, and these are the metabolites that are up. And so we looked at the one that was the highest level, which was sterile carnitine. So then we thought, okay, maybe sterile carnitine is the reason for this. And so we looked at back at all the other diets, and we see that lard and butter, as well as beef, have high levels of sterile carnitine. And this is just a derivative of stearic acid. And we know that stearic acid, which is C18-0 in the fatty acids, is very high in meat. And when we took the T cells and the NK cells out of the mice that were fed the different diets, they also had high stearic acid inside of them. So we thought, okay, well, maybe if we were to reduce stearic acid, would that improve everything? First of all, we gave stearic acid to normal immune cells, and we found it was impairing their ability to kill cancer. So this is one immune cell to 16 target cells. The more you add, the more the tumor cell is killed. But when you give stearic acid into the mix, they killed them much less. So if it's stearic acid, we realized that actually, apart from all the meats which are high in stearic acid, the thing that is highest in stearic acid is chocolate. So, so we can't eat butter, we can't eat chocolate. It's terrible. And so cocoa butter has the most stearic acid. So then we went back and we fed mice. So maybe it's not the animal versus plant, maybe it's the high stearic acid. So we went back and we fed mice now a high-fat diet from stearic acid versus low stearic acid, or a high-fat diet from cocoa, should I say, which is high in stearic acid. And the tumor didn't grow more. And so it was back, okay, stearic or chocolate is not an animal fat. So it's not really. So it's not meat. And so we were kind of surprised about that. But what was different about the animal fat that's not in the plant fat that wasn't just stearic acid, because stearic acid didn't explain it. And this is cholesterol, because most plant fats don't have cholesterol. And so when we added high cholesterol to match the level that was in butter or beef or lard, then the tumor grew bigger. So to really prove it, if it was cholesterol, we supplemented olive oil with cholesterol. And so the first thing that you see is when you make a standard fat diet from olive oil, the mouse is not obese. When when you have the normal level of fat and you add high cholesterol, the mouse doesn't get obese. But when you have high fat made of olive oil or olive oil with cholesterol or lard, the mouse becomes obese. So it's really the high fat diet that causes the obesity, not just high cholesterol. And what we found is so this is the lard growth as the kind of positive control. We know that will grow bigger. This is the high fat diet with olive oil. It's not it's not an animal source, so it doesn't grow any bigger than the normal. But also, if you just give high levels of cholesterol to normal fat diet, it didn't grow any bigger. Only when you gave high cholesterol into the high fat diet of olive oil did the tumor grow really big, similar to the animal. And so we conclude so far, we don't know the full explanation yet, but it's a combination of these long chain fatty acids, excess fatty acids, and cholesterol that accelerates the tumor growth. And it uncouples it from just heaviness or obesity. It suggests that we could potentially, not have to lose weight as the key goal, but more improve our metabolism or improve our metabolome, which would help us more against cancer. Okay, so what we have tried to do in the lab is to take a holistic approach in obesity. Many times when you study, how to improve the immune system against cancer, people pick one cell or one molecule. Obesity is so complex that it's not possible that it's one thing. And so we're trying to take a holistic approach. We're trying to see what's happening in the whole body in response to the diet, which includes our whole metabolic system, and also what this is doing to the tumor itself, and also what it's doing to the immune system. It makes it more complicated to pinpoint it, but we think that this is the only way to be able to do it. And this just to show some other studies that are going on that would agree with that red meat and processed meat can be associated with cancer. I should say I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan. I eat meat, but I think that in many cases the data is very strong. So this study here at the NIH, it studied 500,000 people between the ages of 50 to 71 across many different socioeconomic places, and it followed them for 8.2 years. And during that time, it was reported that in these 500,000 people, there was 53,000 incidents of cancer. And it was really significant that people that at a high level of red meat and processed meat in particular had a 20 to 60% increase of esophageal, colorectal, liver, and lung cancer. And then finally, this is a really cool paper that came out a couple of years ago. They asked, is cancer more associated with the size of the animal? And so we know that within a species, the bigger your body, the more increased risk of cancer. And so this paper asked across different species, is the bigger animals getting more cancer? Like you get more cancer if you're an elephant versus if you're a mouse. And so they looked at zoo animals because it's hard to catch animals in the wild and see if they have cancer. So they did an autopsy on 110,000 zoo animals. And they found that the biggest link between if an animal died of cancer is what they ate. And it was actually animals. It wasn't that. So look, I can't pronounce this, but like moose and deer and things, they hardly get any cancer and they're very big. Mice and rodents get more cancer than these big animals here. But it was the biggest incidence of cancer was in the carnivores. And so that was the most significant. If you're an animal and you eat other mammals, it is associated with increased risk of cancer in your autopsy. So I'm going to finish with this, try and put it into perspective. I'm not sure that diet will be strong enough ever to cure cancer. I don't think it's not like a chemotherapy, which is going to kill all of your cells, including cancer cells. Diet is not powerful enough to do that. It might be in the future, maybe if we were really able to deprive something that the tumor needs. But what I think is the most relevant here is if you're having therapy, then we should really think about what you're going to eat. And so, for example, immunotherapy is a huge breakthrough. It's over traditional cancer therapies. So before, there wasn't much, you get radiation or you get chemotherapy. It kills everything in the vicinity if it's radiation. If it's chemo, it kills your healthy cells and the tumor cells. By using the immune system, it's become more targeted so that you could hopefully just target the immune cells to the tumor. During this time, your diet might be particularly important. So I'll just skip over that. And so the question is, if you're having an immunotherapy, and this is during a relatively short period of time when you really need your immune system to work, you're taking out your immune cells from your blood, you're expanding them in a dish, and then you're putting them back in to kill the tumor. During this time, you absolutely need them to work and you want to give them the best possible chance to work. So if you're having an immunotherapy, should you have steak with butter? Maybe not. And maybe this is the time that we need to think most about the diet. Should you become a vegan during this 6 months that you're having immunotherapy? And so we don't have an answer for that yet, but this is the type of thing that we're thinking about. Is there an anti-cancer diet that you can have during therapy? And with that, I'll thank you all for coming. And also to the people in my lab, this is us here having our dinner in Princeton, a holiday party. These are the people that actually did the work, and these are all our collaborators and our funding. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Lynch, for such a wonderful talk. We've got microphones in each aisle, and we also have a microphone being passed around. And I'll take a look at the chat as well. But if you want to queue up, and we'll start the questions. You might have to lower the microphone a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your talk. This is the first time I'm asking a question. But my interest is someone close to me just developed rheumatoid arthritis, thin, athletic, and surprisingly, but prior to that, there was a problem with, an illness that gave him antibiotics that really did damage to his microbiome.
Yep.
And so it gets me thinking about research that's being done now on the microbiome and its effect on the immune system to allow something like a rheumatoid arthritis to take hold. Now, I'm reaching way out there before the research is there, but I'm curious to know where your thinking is on that and how it might connect to what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, this is a really good point, and it's part of the holistic view. There's no doubt that the microbiome is involved in these results too. When you change the source of fat in the diet, the microbiome will respond. And, we can get the things from the food ourselves, but most often we get what the microbiome has processed. And so we haven't even explored that, but there are people in Princeton and other places exploring that too. And also just to say that, rheumatoid arthritis is one of the things associated with obesity. But if you're not obese, you can still obviously get rheumatoid arthritis. But it can be very often associated with with your metabolome too, which can have a obese-like metabolome even if you're lean. And in fact, if you're obese and have a lean-like metabolome, you don't have increased risk of all of them things. So it's kind of separating the obesity from the metabolome as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you. This was excellent lecture. I myself am an obesity medicine physician at Capitol Health, so this was very relevant to me and seeing everything. And I'm going to try not to go too long. It was just a couple of thoughts I had. I especially really liked the point you made at the beginning of metabolically healthy but still obese individuals. They still have higher risk of immune things, they have higher risk of cancer things. I try to emphasize this point to my patients all the time, that even if your lipid numbers and sugar numbers are okay, to definitely address the excess weight. I guess the question I had, there's always a lot of discussions about different diets, low carb versus low fat, and I try to take an agnostic approach with my patients and talking to people about it, that there's so many different factors. In some of these studies that you did showing with the high fat, I guess sometimes I had the questions of percentage of carbs versus proteins as well. And I know some said the same in terms of how your studies fueled it, but some of the older studies and what that indicated. And
Yeah.
so that was one question I had. And the surgery part was another question.
Mhm.
You mentioned, and I think the diagram even showed a gastric bypass in the picture, but I think the data was showing for a sleeve gastrectomy, and I was just interested if there's any difference because you have differences in absorption from that. And finally, I don't think my wife and 3 daughters would let me in if I tell them not to eat chocolate anymore. So is there any
So you're okay.
is there any difference though in those showing stearic acid in terms of milk chocolate versus dark chocolate? Because we see so many different health benefits from dark chocolate. So
Yeah.
I was just curious because of how many more health benefits we see
Yeah.
from dark
For
chocolate.
for the mice, we didn't distinguish between the two. Actually, they don't get the chocolate even. They just get the lipids from chocolate added into their normal boring chow. Um, so that's the first part. So well, I don't know about that. And I think stearic acid alone, we have shown, doesn't do it. Doesn't cause the increased risk of cancer on its own. It's only in combination with other things. The sleeve, I don't think it makes any difference. I think that has just evolved since we started, and so that didn't seem to make any difference. And the first part, which was
About the different
the
metabolites,
carbs. Oh
fat
yeah,
versus
so
carbs.
they
Yeah.
have a high fat and high sugar. It's a little bit higher sugar than the standard fat diet. And what was I going to say? What was the first part of the
I
question
guess
that
the
you said?
question more was in some of
Oh
those
yeah,
earlier
oh,
studies, the
yeah.
different carbs.
So I was going to
Yeah.
say, for example, ketogenic diet. There's a lot of people thinking about the ketogenic diet now, and in some cases, the ketogenic diet is working with other therapies, for example, for pancreatic cancer. There's evidence that, like, if you think about obesity, it was first thought that the high glucose and high insulin was what's driving tumors in obesity. A ketogenic diet, which will be the elimination of carbs and really just a high fat diet, will reduce glucose and insulin. And so that will have a beneficial effect. However, there was a few studies recently shown that a ketogenic diet doesn't improve tumors most of the time because they still have the high fat. And so a ketogenic diet might work for a tumor that doesn't really like fat, but won't work for a tumor that loves fat. You're taking away the glucose and insulin, but you're still providing the fat. In some cases, if a tumor really likes fat, I think a ketogenic diet could be dangerous. And so really the point is there's going to be no one diet fits all. We have to understand the tumor preference and immune cell preference before we would make accommodations, maybe except in immunotherapy when we could be more general.
Thank you. And just one last thing, real
Hold on,
quick.
we have so many people.
I know. This is just
All
the
right,
last thing.
no, I know, but that was three,
It's just the
right? We're trying to keep it to one.
when you meant
And
animals
there's no
versus
stopping them.
yeah, I was just saying animals versus plants. Does that include dairy? And that's it.
We don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Well, we can talk after.
Likewise, I have so many questions, but I'll keep it to one. Also, thank you for the wonderful talk. I loved the way you broke everything down and made it really understandable for those of us who are not molecular biologists. So, my question for you is, do you find the same data around meat in people's diets in different countries and cultures? For example, in a place like Kazakhstan, where there's a higher emphasis on eating meat, do we find the same frequency and correlation between obesity and cancer?
I don't know the answer to that. That would be a really good thing to think about. One of the PhD students in my lab, Ayantu, she's from Ethiopia, and they do a lot, or she does, and her family do fasting for months at a time. She becomes a vegan for a couple of months, and but before that, before the time when she switches to vegan and fasts, they have a big meat feast. And I think that we were thinking to actually go study this, like, is the effect on this kind of long-term eating processed meat versus a big meat feast and then having a break. I think having a break from meat, and even if you eat meat but having breaks, that seems to be the data coming through so far. Now, so you would have to take that into account if you're looking at other cultures, if it's processed meat, if they have breaks from high meat or not. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that really great talk. So one of the differences between lipids is, of course, their levels of unsaturation. And I'm curious, it's been said that aspirin sometimes can prevent the causation of cancer by blocking the arachidonic pathway. And I was wondering if the induction of cancer, the form, the start of cancer
Yeah.
rather than the immune response to it, is tied to the free radical arachidonic acid pathway, whether that could impact, like if you eat, you take Lovesa, for instance,
Yeah.
or EPA, do you get a lower incidence of cancer?
This is such a good point, but it's a can of worms. So, one of the things, first of all, arachidonic acid, this can be anti-inflammatory. Okay, so it's kind of complicated in obesity because you've got inflammation and immune suppression at the same time. So it's a paradox. In obesity, we think that there's inflammation in the tumor sometimes, but not specific immune cells in to kill the tumor. I didn't show it there, but the fish diet, the fish high-fat diet, also also doesn't have accelerated tumor growth, but the mice don't gain weight because they don't like eating fish, and therefore we couldn't put it in with the others. But the difference is that in the fish diet they have a lot of arachidonic acid in the tumor, and it seems to be beneficial. But this is not what the arachidonic acid turns into, with the COX pathway. So arachidonic acid is now being given in trials with immunotherapy to be a positive. So that's one complication, if you have inflammation at the same time. In terms of aspirin, we haven't done anything in this field, but a couple of other things that you said in there is like there's so many people now trying to understand this, but it's very nuanced. It's very up and down.
Also related to aspirin, one of the questions in the chat was about statins and whether we're seeing
Yeah.
an impact in how they reduce cholesterol.
So statins are associated with reduced risk of cancer. We have found, though, often if you take cholesterol from the diet, then cells make cholesterol. If you stop them making it, then they take it from the diet. So the statin would have to be given with a low cholesterol diet, because the cells have a way around it. I'm just after thinking of something else now that man just asked, but I'll try and find them at the break.
Curious about the growing incidence of colorectal cancer in young people that's been
Yeah.
occurring recently. I didn't realize that endometrial also had been, I guess, an increased rate in younger people.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is that also true? Is there a linkage between that you've been looking at perhaps? But you say there's no link between, I guess, but the colorectal cancer and the types of versus animal fats and
Yeah.
plant fats. You didn't see that. But
No.
is there obesity link also with colorectal cancer?
There is. So this is why people were thinking that there was this increased risk of colorectal cancer in young people because of obesity. However, there's so much stuff just come out recently that shows the young people that are getting colorectal cancer in their 20s and 30s are not obese. However, their diet could still be an obesogenic diet. They're just not obese yet because they have all the young people factors to prevent them from having obesity. And also alcohol and lack of exercise has been shown. And then there's also one microbiome link that has been shown to be high in young people with colorectal cancer. So it's still, I think that will be cracked, but it's not completely understood yet. Endometrial cancer the increased risk is, a lot of it is just because of obesity.
Thank you.
Thank you for this talk. I was wondering what spicy food does to the idea of obesity.
So that's a great question. I don't know fully, but when I was at Harvard, there was a couple of surgeons that were studying this, and these features of hot peppers. There's a lot of people studying obesity, and these components of hot peppers having a positive effect. Positive by reducing obesity or obesity associated complications, but I'm not an expert in that, so I don't want to say any more than that.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
First of all, thank you for the lecture. I really liked it. Oh, sorry.
Thank you for the lecture. I really liked it, and I really liked there was a lot of like data and stuff that you showed. Um, I've got two questions. One of them is really quick. Is it possible to go back to one of the slides where there were like the zoo animals? Because on that, I saw you can see in between the rhino and the kangaroo, there is just a outlier. I
Oh,
can't read
this
that.
one here?
Yeah, I was wondering what that's about.
Oh, you know, I was only looking at this side and here. So that's this thing here.
Yeah,
Does anybody know what that is?
no.
I don't know, but I'm going to look it up as soon as I go home if nobody else knows.
And second, you said that you expected coconuts to be the highest for the cancer and stuff, because they had saturated
Yeah.
fats, but they ended up having like little to no effect.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that implies that saturated fats themselves have little to no effect on cancer and why that might be.
So the mice that ate coconut, they still got tumors. It just wasn't accelerated tumor growth. We were surprised as we both thought that it would be coconut because of the high saturated fat. But the coconut is still, it doesn't have cholesterol, and so maybe it's the combination of the saturated with other things. And with just one, the body can handle it, but with a few negative things, the body can't. Um, I would still say saturated fat, too much saturated fat is bad, but it's not the only thing. Yeah,
Thank you.
they're great questions. Thank you for asking.
This mic is tall. Hello, Professor Lynch. First of all, thank you so much for this talk. I truly feel like I learned so much. This definitely is not stuff that I would traditionally learn in a high school class, so thank you. I guess my question would be, so before I came here, I was reading some of your other research as well, and I found that you did research on how T cells and respond to the molecular clock that we have in our body. And I was wondering, do you have similar research in regards to NK cells, or are there any connections you can make between this molecular clock research and the research you presented today?
That's a great question. So yes, all cells have a molecular clock, but some cells have an even stronger one. And actually, NK cells, they're not ones with a really strong molecular clock. However, if you think about it, we have, because we're supposed to sleep at nighttime and get up and eat in the day, that is a big driver of changes in the immune system. And there was a paper, a very striking paper about a month ago showing that the time of immunotherapy really matters to the outcome of immunotherapy. Unfortunately, mice are nocturnal and we're studying them in the daytime when they're asleep. And so we are not getting immunotherapy in the night. We are not getting our vaccines in the middle of the night when we're asleep. And so a lot of the things we're finding with mice is actually not relevant because of that. And so, well, in Princeton, we have light boxes so that we can switch their circadian rhythm to be the same as ours. And that helps a little bit. But I think if you think about a natural killer cell, it's in and out of the tissue, it's whizzing around the blood and in and out of the tissue, and that changes between day and night. So the surveillance that goes on between day and night is different, but also the bombardment of what we eat is they're having a break at nighttime, and they're eating in the daytime, which is affecting the NK cells. If somebody was to snack all day long, into a midnight snack, maybe, that seems to have a really bad impact on the immune system. So having a break from eating seems to be really important.
Thank you
There
so
are
much.
two related questions in the chat about diet. One was on your comments about fish. Are fattier fishes perhaps better? And then on the other side of that was about claims from the keto diet that it is good for cancer. It talks about the fact that cancer cells need glucose and an all meat diet.
Yes.
So have you debunked keto?
No, no. My colleague Josh Rabinowitz and others, they're also studying ketogenic diet. And it's similar to the answer that I gave. I think a ketogenic diet, when a tumor is fueled by glucose and insulin, a ketogenic diet will stop that. However, if a tumor is fueled by fat, a ketogenic diet provides so much fat to a tumor. So that's why there's so many books on what to eat when you get cancer. Like there's there's so much contradicting stuff. It's very hard for somebody who, first of all, when you get diagnosed with cancer, the first thing that you often say is, well, what can I do to help myself and what should I eat? If you were to go and try and get a book, I don't know how you would get the answer. And so I think we have to understand the fuel of that exact tumor to be able to properly feel preference, to be able to properly say what you should and shouldn't eat.
And you saved us with chocolate. What about wine?
I'd say chocolate, wine, and butter. I think it's just all fine. Once you give yourself a break.
There, right before you go, there is a student in the back who wanted to ask a question. Yeah, go ahead. If you could stand up.
Many people around the world rely on Ozempic to lose weight. How would that change the chance of getting cancer?
That's a great question. That's a question that's very topical. A lot of people are studying that. And so far, all of the results are positive. Ozempic reduces your chance of cancer. It's been shown for colorectal cancer to reduce your cancer risk by 50%, which is very high. We're doing this trial to see if it can be a cure as part of a treatment for endometrial cancer. And so far, we've just written an article on this. The data suggests it reduces cancer risk. And at the Ludwig and in Princeton, we're trying to understand what's the effect of Ozempic on immune cells, because immune cells don't have the receptor for GLP, which is Ozempic, but it still seems to be able to affect them. And so we're trying to understand how could it affect them if they can't directly see it themselves. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Lynch. That was a amazing talk. I really appreciate the way you brought together all the data and all the various components of the question about cancer and diet. I'm a functional medicine doctor, and I study how to reverse disease largely by dietary changes and lifestyle changes. And one of the things that I found interesting is that if you decreased your fat intake, you could decrease the growth of cancers. Of course, some people are normal weight and develop cancer. Would that concept of decreasing the fat in that diet of the normal weight person also be considered helpful?
This is a great question. It's very tricky because it depends on what is fueling that person's tumor. All of the mice, no matter what they eat, they get cancer. None of the mice were protected from getting cancer. It was just that it grew faster, or it developed quicker and grew faster if they ate the high fat from certain diets. So if you have a tumor, for example, breast cancer often really likes lipids because it lives in adipose tissue. It lives in your fat. And so, for example, if you were to reduce lipid intake in breast cancer, that could potentially be beneficial, whether you have obesity or not. I think there's many things that would be not just cancer related for how you could improve other diseases with diet, and I think exercise is the one. Exercise and caloric restriction, or giving yourself a break from eating, not necessarily fasting for the whole day, but giving yourself a long many hours of not eating. That seems to be the strongest data so far. There's never, like with other diets, it's very conflicting which one works. The ones that always come out to be helpful is caloric restriction, as in at least a good part of the day not eating, and exercise.
Like intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to smartphone, Google, and open databases, I was able to find that outlier.
Oh yeah? What is it?
It is the Australian carnivores marsupials.
Oh, so it's still a carnivore.
Yeah.
It's not.
And funny enough, one of the name is Tasmanian devil.
Oh. Yeah, they get terrible face cancer, actually. Yeah.
So I was wondering if the killing machinery is able to kill the tumor, how does it not kill the NK cell? And what if the tumor is an NK cell?
That's a super, super smart question. So usually the tumor is not an NK cell. It could be a T cell like a leukemia, but it's usually not an NK cell. NK cells have certain proteins in them that protect them from the things that would kill them. And so when you're a cell that has granzymes and perforins, you have the potential that they could kill you. They have a thing that, first of all, they keep them in a compartment so that they can never come out into the cell. And that whole compartment goes to the surface when it sees the tumor and is released into the tumor. But just in case someone was to get back in, they have a protease that would protect them from being killed by their own by their own granzymes.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I had two questions. The first one was alcohol takes huge toll on the pancreas, we know that. So what does it do to lipids in the natural killer cells? So that was my first question.
You know, we haven't studied alcohol. Alcohol is immune suppressant. So even just after one night of drinking, your immune system is suppressed the next day. So you would have more chance. By immune suppressant means your surveillance system, including your NK cells, is a bit weaker, a bit slower, and so it might miss something. You've got more of a chance of getting infections during, if you've had a lot of alcohol binging or something. But we don't know about the lipids. We don't know if it's anything got to do with lipids or anything like that. We just know it's a general immune suppressant.
Okay, and my second question was that if someone eats a high-fat diet and then does equal exercise, does it reduce the damage on the NK cells?
It seems to, yeah.
Okay.
Also, if you, for example, if you go away for your vacation and you eat a high-fat diet for 2 weeks, it's a little bit, your immune system might be a bit sluggish, but when you return and you go back to a normal diet, then it's fine. It doesn't have much lasting damage. If you do it for years and years and years, the longer you do it, the more lasting memory the immune system has of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So since cancer is like a series of random mutations that happens in a cell, wouldn't that mean that there would be like hundreds of different variations of cancer? So how would you expect the same results from, say you test like lung cancer?
Yeah.
How would you expect the same results from testing lung cancer if there are multiple ways that it can mutate?
So two parts to that. The first one is the mutation that the tumor has can help the tumor decide what fuel it likes the best. And so that's part of the reason we can't say, if you have cancer, don't eat this, because it depends on the mutation. But the second part is it doesn't matter what type of mutation it is, the immune system will, well, that's not completely true. The immune system way to detect tumor is the same no matter what type of mutation the tumor has. So the effect on the immune surveillance and the immune system's ability to see the tumor, that will still be, you could still get the same results of the different diets on the immune system's side of things. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. I have 1,000 questions, so I'll just try to stick to
email
just
me
one.
if you want.
I may try to stalk you, but cannot count that against me.
It's okay.
So my mom is going through, her cancer came back. So I deal a lot with her doctors. So I was wondering, how long does it take for your research to reach the clinical doctors? Because I'm getting different messages from them.
Yep.
And, she's told to eat high-fat diet, to gain weight, and
Yeah.
which is kind of different from what you
So
said.
that it takes many, many years, and that's just one of the facts about research, because we start in the dish, then we move to mice or animals sometimes, and then you have to do a phase 1 trial, which is a few people, just to not even see if it works, but to make sure no harm comes to the people, and all that just takes years, because it could take a year even to get just approval to try it in a person from the animal. But you can, if sometimes you can try and get the most information you can from the doctor. If they have sequenced the tumor, you might be able to go and get advice based on the type of tumor. And then if your mom has been asked to gain weight, this can also be associated with in some types of tumor, it can cause cachexia, which is wasting, and that can prevent a person from getting treatment because they're not strong enough. And so they need to gain weight in order to get the treatment, so the treatment doesn't damage them so much. And so, yeah, that's another side of it, which, maybe, and a high-fat diet is the quickest way to gain weight because you get most energy from fat than you do from protein and carbs.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
So the natural killer cells have lytic granules, and normally most cells have a lysosome, which Thing explainer described as a bag of death water.
Yeah.
Is it possible that the lytic granules are like an overdeveloped lysosome for that?
You're a scientist, I think, because so lysosome is my favorite organelle of the cell. The lysosome is where many things come to be recycled, as you know. So like food, nutrients, but also pieces of the cell and stuff, and then you can use it again. A natural killer cell doesn't have many lysosomes, bona fide lysosomes. Instead, it has lytic granules because it's a specialized cell for killing. And so the lytic granule is a lysosome, but it's a specialized lysosome. And as a result, it doesn't have that many real lysosomes. Now, we have a hypothesis that the reason it doesn't have that many in obesity, the reason that it doesn't have that many perforin and granzymes in the NK cell is because
more
they're more lysosomes. So the nutrient sensing mTOR on the lysosome is telling them make more lysosomes, and they're making them at the expense of lytic granules. And if you want to come to the lab to test that hypothesis, you're welcome.
You got a job.
Thank you.
So I was just wondering, since, for example, in the human brain, the brain cells, there's like healthy brain cells can tell immune cells not to kill them because they're extremely delicate and they also prevent autoimmune disease. So one of my questions is, one simple question: are there tumors that can take advantage of this like thing that the brain cells can do, and they order the natural killer cells not to kill them?
Yeah.
And does obesity really accelerate the effect?
So that's a very smart question too. So first of all, a normal healthy brain, it doesn't have so much immune cells going into it to kill, because it has a blood-brain barrier which protects that. But still, if the blood-brain barrier is compromised, for example, if you have a MS or something, or sometimes maybe in long COVID, there's immune cells, there are certainly things that immune cells make getting into the brain. So the brain has a barrier, but also has other mechanisms, like you said. Does the tumor act like the brain cells to stop the NK cells from killing it? Absolutely. That's how tumors escape the immune system all the time. So that's a very smart observation.
And with that, if we could please thank Professor Lynch one more time
Yeah.
for just a wonderful talk.